Things off. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chad Sluss. I'm the CEO with the National Equipment Finance Association. Thanks for joining us today on this webinar entitled Build a Better Borrower and Vendor Experience with Embedded Finance. Our guests today are Christian Dolan with Northtech. He's our moderator. We also have Lynette Bosler with Great America Financial Services, Aaron Zollner, Geneva Capital, Jeremy Gillum, Amore Equipment Finance, and Nate Gibbons with QuickFi. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed panelists. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chad, and appreciate your time. I mean, maybe we'll start with what the definition of embedded finance is, which is one slide. Yeah, there we go. So on the textbook definition is really integrating financial services into non-financial applications, and I think we've all seen versions of this. But what I'd like to do is start with asking the panelists what their interpretation of what embedded finance is. So maybe I'll start with you, Lynette. So from your perspective, what does embedded finance mean to you in Great America?
For us at Great America, embedded finance really means meeting the vendor, meeting the borrower where they are in the sales process. And I think companies have done this for years in a non-techie way, right? Even if you think about buying a car, you go into the dealership, you're not only selecting your product there, but you're also doing the financing at the same time. The copier industry has been doing this for decades. To be quite honest, I don't know that you could even walk into an office equipment dealer and pay cash for a copier anymore, because that financing piece is so embedded in what they do. And then if you fast forward to where we are today, especially given the past few years in the environment that we've been in with COVID, embedded finance really ramped up to hit on that technology piece really hard. So when you talked about meeting the vendor, meeting the customer where they are, that meant meeting them on their laptop, on their tablet, on their cell phone, and letting them do the financing, right from their technology.
Okay, thanks. I mean, that's neat. It seems like the way you describe it, it's really blurring the line between like making a purchase and financing. It's all one and the same. At least you said that in the copier industry. So, Aaron, where does Geneva? What's Geneva's perspective on this, and what's yours personally?
Yeah, Lynette did an excellent job describing that there. It's kind of right in the description there, your financial services and technology, integrating those into a site that would offer a smooth and seamless experience for the end user, really. You think about the e-commerce industry, allowing the end user to choose a product and purchase that product without a lot of interaction and really smoothly. And for us, it's providing those products to our vendors to allow them to integrate those into their sites to seamlessly sell their product and provide a financing solution for them that allows the customer to purchase something, apply for financing, sign documents all within a matter of minutes, and have that product in their hands.
Great. Well, Nate, kind of passing on to you. You guys are well respected in the industry and a thought leader. I'd love to get what your and QuickFi definition of embedded finance is.
Yeah, happy to comment. And I do agree with some of the comments that have been shared so far. I think when I think about it, and when my colleagues and I think about embedded finance, especially as it pertains to this definition, I think it's important to understand who the users are and also where the finance offerings are embedded, because this subtle distinction is what's causing certain companies to achieve massive competitive differentiation and realize unexpected levels of revenue and even customer loyalty. And the reality is that because we're already in financial services, our instinct is to figure out how we can digitize our existing business model. But the power, at least in my opinion, in embedded finance is when seamless digital finance offerings are embedded into the customer's daily activities, not ours. It's similar to what's already been mentioned. Most consumers, and now it's beginning to be most business customers, prefer not to have to engage with standalone separate financial service companies. And based on new technology that exists now that didn't exist before, they don't have to anymore. And this is why, in my opinion, embedded finance really is all about borrower self-service and enabling customers to purchase something, whether it's online or in person, and have the option to, as was mentioned, spend an extra 5 minutes to finance the purchase if they choose to do so.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's almost as if like we were invisible behind the scenes and didn't even exist, is what the best borrower experience is, right? Like the financing is just that integrated with the purchase. Well, great. Well, Jeremy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and kind of hear how Amor interprets embedded finance.
Yeah, Christian, thanks for the introduction. And I'm really happy and excited to be here, getting to meet some new people and have some really interesting conversations. So thank you for that. Embedded finance, for us, it's about creating a more intuitive and accessible personal financial experience for our customers and for our partners, right? The perspective that I've gained over the years is really informed by the technical as well as the practical implications of embedded finance, right? We were all talking about this. It's really the future of these financial transactions that are a part of our everyday business. And really what these integrations mean, what they do for us, it's going to reduce friction for our customers. It's going to make the experience more intuitive. And it gets us to a point where it's not so much about offering financial services, but about embedding these services directly into the customer's journey so they don't have to leave the platform. They don't have to step out of the buying experience in order to interact with us. And the smoother we can make that, obviously, the more successful it makes all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, great. Well, I see a lot of common themes, and I'm excited for this discussion, because I think we're really going to unpack this further and bring it down to a lower level and talk about next steps on how to get started. So why don't we go ahead and on to the next slide. Okay, so these are just a couple examples of things that we see every day, right? I think if you go to buy an airline ticket, you're being asked if you want to pay for a credit card that you don't even have yet. If you buy something in Best Buy, they're gonna right there on the checkout ask if you want to have a warranty included on that. You can go out and buy a $1,000 pair of skis and make 4 equal payments of $250 for them while you're checking out on the point of sale system. So we're seeing this, right? Like, I think all of us have seen this, and we've seen it for years on the consumer side. What I'd like to hear from the panelists is like what sort of use cases are we seeing in equipment finance? And so I'm just going to kind of leave it open and see if anyone has any real life equipment finance examples that they could volunteer during this panel.
I'm happy to comment first. I know this isn't a marketing campaign, right? The reality is that our company sees this every day. I mean, it's the reason that we built our product and we consider our platform an embedded finance platform. So I guess my ability to give examples is best kind of indicated by what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. One example is I guess I'll just pick an industry, is in the construction space, where it's not very dissimilar to how a consumer would finance or purchase an automobile. If you think of excavators or bulldozers, there are business owners in many cases who are going to a dealership and they're picking out the machine that they want. And should they choose a finance option, the goal is to be able to complete that financing, the application, the contract process, and the signing on the contract in a very short, simple process. And that's essentially what we've designed. One of the sort of newer versions of our product is actually an e-commerce platform that allows business borrowers to identify equipment that they'd like to purchase for their business on the manufacturer's product page. And then as they're checking out, they can both apply for and kind of get their financing in place during the product checkout process. So those are some examples that are very recent, and so far the response has been interesting because it's such a significant difference in terms of the historical or traditional financing process.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds, I think as far as like bringing it to the point of sale is what's key there, right? Like you're bringing it to that checkout process, whether it's e-commerce or, you know, a traditional point of sale system. Anybody else? Anybody have any other examples?
Christian, how we're seeing it on our side is with the vendor partnerships, them offering their product on their website and having an integration through an API that helps them change pricing on those products, stored on another system, right? So we can easily change those whether they're on a weekly or monthly basis. And then also give that customer the option to click through and apply for financing and help them complete that sale as another tool. You know, really make those payments as low as attractive to the end user, and then integrate with a finance company that can help close that sale for them and increase business volume on both ends. So
Right.
there's a high demand for that right now, and it's, you know, it started off as kind of a sizzle factor item, and then it's become very warranted in the industry right now. So
Yeah, that's great. So you're essentially you're helping your vendor partners by making their equipment more affordable and making sure that's more visible to the end consumer. That's great.
The interesting thing to me, Christian, on both of those pieces, as both Nate and Aaron were talking, my husband farms. And so, you know, you would have historically said, hey, I need to go to a John Deere dealership and I need to look at a tractor. I need to test drive it. You know, I need that like hands-on experience to buy equipment. But the reality is, much to my dismay, he spends every night in front of his computer, you know, researching equipment, you know, talking to friends in the industry. And so he doesn't need to go to the dealership. He doesn't need to physically leave the comfort of his office to make a $250,000 purchase, because he knows the equipment, he's talked to people. So I think the world has just changed in terms of access that business owners have to information online about equipment they want to purchase. And so that in-person, go to a construction dealer, whether it's ag equipment, you know, those kinds of things, they know what they want to buy. I think some areas that are really interesting, and maybe areas where you deal with larger companies, if you've got like a procurement specialist, they don't know everything about all of the equipment they may need to purchase for a company. But in those small business settings, construction, medical, automotive repair, some of those areas, those guys know that equipment, they know what they want to buy, and they can just go online and do it. They don't need to visit a physical location. So the ability to embed the finance option for them is just huge.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I remember when I was introduced to the industry, and this was so many years ago, when someone was explaining like how quickly you could go get financing as a consumer, like for an automobile, but the same exact price commercial equipment could take weeks, right? I mean, now it's granted, I've come down to days, and for a lot of companies, hours, but now we're taking it from hours to minutes, right? Which is neat.
Well, I've got an interesting example, I think, and it's kind of close to home, because today my wife is getting on an airplane to go see our son in San Diego, and she said, "How do I get from the airport to the hotel?" I'm like, "Well, use the Uber app," right? And I thought about this again, as we talked about it the other day, how deeply embedded the finance is within that app, right? It's not only the integration of the credit card and the payment system so that she can pay for her ride, but it's also the finance capabilities that's given to the driver, right? As an Uber driver, I can get instant payouts. but also Uber as a company is getting all the data. They're getting my data, where I go, how I go there, when I go there. They're getting the driver data, putting all of this together to bolster the services that they can offer, right? And I think about how we bring that same sort of concept back into our industry. We're not only setting the stage for seamless integration with our customers, but our vendors are going to get paid faster. There's the ability to process payments. Lenders are getting paid faster. Everything can move at a faster pace and be, seamlessly integrated. Plus the plethora of data that flows off of that we can capture and harness, learn from it, and develop more functionality.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I think it dovetails greatly to our next slide too, because we'll be talking about those different touch points with those different parties, like the vendor you talked about, Jeremy. So well, let's kind of talk about like benefits. Nate, I'll start with you. So tell me about the borrower. Like what do they have to gain from having this embedded finance experience?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the benefits discussion is a great one. I think it's a great segue from both Jeremy and Lynette's comments, because this is kind of one of those unique dynamics where, with a lot of trends that take place, whether they're technological or regulatory or otherwise, they're largely driven by customer preferences, existing preferences or preferences that customers don't yet know that they have. But unlike other one-sided disruptive trends that have taken place, this one's unique because of the many different players that it benefits. I mean, anyone who truly cares about what our customers feel and experience when they interact with us, we've all been trying to figure out ways to remove friction and to delight customers. And with respect to Jeremy's comments, while we've been looking for ways to bring much needed improvement to the customer experience, it's also the vendors that are benefiting. So I think that dynamic makes just this particular trend to embedded finance particularly unique, because it's one of those sort of disruptive trends that's benefiting or can benefit virtually everyone involved. With respect to consumers, my answer is not terribly long, but in short, what consumers desire most is time. It's control over our time, and convenience, and removing friction, and simplicity, and self-service. All these things which are included in embedded finance, they all give borrowers control over their time. Again, to relate back to kind of what Jeremy was saying, those benefits carry through to the vendors and OEMs as well, because time is important to them as well. And to Jeremy's point, it's in the form of speed, right? Anyone who makes and sells products wants to be able to sell as much of that product as quickly as possible, and do so in a way that enhances their brand. And statistically, vendors that offer financing for their products, they have a higher chance of selling more equipment. But the financing can sometimes be a detriment to the overall experience if it's complicated, if it's full of friction. The interesting thing about embedded finance is that it's sort of created this revelation that the selling process, the speed of the selling process, goes way up when we can relinquish control to the customer and allow them to self-serve. Whereas historically, the mentality has been, we have to bring customers in and we have to see them. And if we can do that and get them in the doors and interact with them, then we can convince them of the merit of our product. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic, and even a mindset shift where it's the opposite. It's actually giving the control to the customer and giving them the ability to self-serve that has caused that speed to go up, and actually product sales to go up alongside of it.
And efficiencies for the lender. I don't mean to jump ahead, but right, like, I mean, if the customer's doing the work, it's saving both the vendor and the lender time. So that's great. That's a great point, Nate. And who doesn't want to be delighted, right? Like that's well said. So okay, so let's talk about Lynette. You guys do a lot of vendor business. So tell me what the impact is for the vendors.
Yeah, this is huge for us, and I always have to sort of reframe my verbiage. Christian reminds me of this. We refer to the equipment vendors and manufacturers as our customers. When I think about them, I'm going to actually piggyback right off Nate's comments around time. If you're that sales guy and you're out in the field and you are selling and you are visiting with your customers. That's what that sales team wants to be doing. The last thing they want to be doing is chasing papers, making sure they got credit conditions taken care of, making sure they got the right signer. They want to be out talking to their customers. And so we're really trying to give them time back, right, with an embedded finance solution. The other thing that those sales guys really, really want, and I want it for them as well, is to move more equipment. And the way they do that is taking those deals off the streets. And my team is so tired of hearing me talk about, I have so much passion for getting our customers to a spot where they've gotten their customer to sign on the dotted line, right? Even if that equipment has not been delivered, even if it is not in use, when that borrower signs on the dotted line, they've essentially closed the deal in their mind, right? So the next guy that goes and calls on them, they're saying, no, I just signed a deal with Nate last week. Sorry, you're a week late. And so that just really lands the deal for our customer, the vendor. That's so important for us to be able to help them with that. It's good for them. Again, to Nate's point, it's good for the borrower. It's good for the lender. And once that deal is signed, what does that sales guy get to go do? Let's go talk to more customers, right? Just what he wants to be doing. So really hard to argue with that.
Or go golfing, right?
Or go golfing, but that's probably a business meeting anyway. So make that work.
Yeah. Okay, so Aaron, from like a lender standpoint, where do you see the benefits?
Yeah, I think Nate and Lynette, spot on there. You're really enhancing that customer experience. You're enhancing that partnership with the vendor, right? You're providing tools from the lender side to the vendor side to allow them to close more transactions and do it as quickly as possible. Like Lynette had said, a seamless experience from the time that they choose to click on that piece of equipment all the way through until signing before anybody else has a shot at it, right? You want that customer to just make that decision on the spot without really digging into other options. And providing that smooth, seamless experience like Nate had talked about really enables future sales growth within your company. Another item that you mentioned is the ability for automation, right? Automate and bring in different software abilities for allow you to, as a lender, to grow your business, to be able to do more with less. So,
well said. So, okay, so one thing, one clear stakeholder that's not listed here, but I think is fairly well represented with NEFA is our third-party originators or our brokers, right? And I think it's obvious to say, I shouldn't say it's obvious, but I think the talking point is, as like a TPO or a broker, how do I keep myself from becoming intermediated or disintermediated, I should say, from this technology? And Jeremy, Amur is, a leader in the TPO space as far as, originations and all that. What is your thoughts on this, and how does Amur think about this?
Well, I think what's interesting about, again, the third party originators not being represented on this slide, but in fact they are, right? They represent and coordinate with each of these stakeholders. So their coordination efforts have the most to gain by this embedded finance, right? So while some of us may, we're at a more familiar with all three of these different individuals as well as the third party originators, I have to, tip my hat to them. It is a lot more of a coordination effort. It adds to the complexity, and it just makes the prospect of technology like embedded finance that much more appealing.
Right. So just having, if I'm a broker and I'm listening to this, it's really building these connections and building the automation that's needed to interact with all these parties. Is that where you're kind of going with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that each of you, as you described some of the benefits here, they're obviously important to the third party originators, but they, again, just have that much more to keep track of.
Sure. Okay, fantastic.
Kirsten, this is Chad. We had a question come in, and I think it was somewhat answered there, but I'll read it to you if you want to take it now. It sort of ties in with the discussion point. It says, can we see how the system works? A simple example. As a broker, how would this benefit us? I think it was somewhat answered there, but if you want to, if anyone wants to expand on it, perhaps.
Chad, can you just repeat the first part of that? The first part of the question?
Sure. So the question is, can we see how the system works? I.e. a simple example. As a broker, how would this benefit us?
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think, you know, one, I guess, similar experience for brokers is, you know, we work with a fair bit of brokers, and brokers will have vendor portals, right? Like, it's not uncommon for the broker themselves to build these relationships with the vendors. And what I think where Nate was talking about and what Aaron was talking about was actually embedding yourself within these e-commerce platforms. I think what's going to be key there from a broker standpoint is the automation and the syndication, right? Like, if you're gonna take it in and you're gonna send it to a third party, I think to really make the solution work, you need to have an automated solution. And so I don't know if that means pre-funding the deal or quickly working with partners, you know, like Amur, to quickly get a credit decision back. So you're saving the time that Nate and Aaron were talking about, right? I think that's the key. I mean, you add one more party and you really have to have an integrated, automated solution to make this work. That's my question. I don't know if anybody else has other thoughts there. All right. Well, let's move on to the next slide. So we want to kind of help the audience get there, right? So the next few slides is like, what do we, how do we get there? So maybe we'll start with you, Lynette. Let's talk about, you know, you guys are an established company, been around for a long time. You're going from kind of more, you know, systems that you originally had to newer systems. Like, what are some of the challenges for that you would anticipate people will face?
These are always fun sessions in which we get to air our own dirty laundry. You know, this first one, data, Christian, just speaks to me and not in a good way. So, you know, Great America has been around for 30 years, lots of legacy systems that we're working off of. We've also spent 30 years being a very high touch organization. Humans doing all the work. If you think about, you know, your sales team to your credit analyst to your documentation team, you know, we're creating agreements, we're getting on the books, but it's all been humans doing the work. And it's just interesting, as we've started to automate personally, we have found data where we just have not done a good job in terms of data governance and stewardship in there. We've done a lot of one-off things for particular customers. You may have a customer say, hey, I want to make sure I can see the store number on the agreement so that when the customer signs, they can see that store number. Our team would have said, great, let me put that store number and address, the first line of the address. And then the second line of the address will be their actual physical location. It seems like a great idea because when you have humans looking at that, they can clearly look and see when it says store number 739 in the address line, they know that's not really the address, and their eyes just move on to that second address line. Unfortunately, when you go to automate, you know, if you're using a tool like Informatica, or you're trying to automate off that data at all, it doesn't know that store number 739 is not an address, and it's going to fail through the automation process. So, you know, I think one of the big things, if you think about preparing for embedded finances, all the things that you've relied on humans to do, and honestly, probably work that wasn't real value add. If you think about having a human try to remember, you know, store 739, not the address, flip down to the next line. That's not value add work. We should be automating, you know, address validations anyway. But if you've got fields that you have bastardized, is the way we talk about it. If you've bastardized those fields to do something different than what they were intended for, you're going to really struggle to automate off of that. And so if you can stop the bleeding now and get people on board with quality data is huge, you're going to be miles ahead. You're going to have a ton of cleanup work, but you've at least stopped the bleeding and you can move forward with people understanding the value of the data around your customers. To your point here, your programs, your vendors, your rates, if you automate off bad data, you're going to end up with a bad result.
Yeah, that's great feedback, because I think that, for the audience members that are thinking, how do I get started, or where do I get started? It's really easy to just jump in. But if you're building this on top of some non-cleansed data, you could just be opening up a can of worms. And the reality is, people aren't all going to have budget for these big embedded finance projects in 2024. So maybe something they can do between now and then is start to get their data cleaned up and ready for a project like this. So great advice, Lynette. Thank you. So, obviously there's a lot of talk in the industry about platform versus software, and like having things be extensible. And Jeremy, like when we talk about embedded finance, talk to us about, what a platform is and why is it important in this context?
So I can relate to a lot of what Lynette said. Moore's been around for many, many years, right? We've had multiple legacy systems. We've had many manual processes. We've got a lot of experience at that. And this is where over the last few years we've really evolved and transformed, right? To me, platform is really our toolkit. Maybe it's our software, maybe it's a set of core applications, but it's really the foundation of the technology that we're able to put out there, that we're able to interface with our vendor partners and our broker partners, our end user customers, and as well as our internal users, right? So when it comes time to look at embedded finance and bring it into your business, you have to be very sharp about platform selection, right? It has to be secure, it has to be scalable, it has to be flexible. It's really a time-consuming decision-making process that you really need to, I hate to say it, go slow, and really look at what all is out there. There's a host of tools. In today's technology toolkit, they all talk to each other, right? I know we're going to get into APIs here in a little bit, but not too many years ago, that was a big problem. You could have two pieces of software that did great together, but the vendors weren't going to help the two pieces talk to each other. And it took a pretty strong lift from a technology standpoint to make those things connect and pass data back and forth. And now it's it's a given with just about any commercial off-the-shelf software. It's going to have open API, or at least some sort of API capabilities. So you've got that scalability and that flexibility, but it's a very important, as much as the data, the platform selection, as far as building out your solution.
Great, thank you. And then partners, obviously this is a component of this. Aaron, can you speak about partners and how that fits onto the third tier of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Lynette said, having your data in check, you're only as good as your data, and making sure that's accurate so it can do work for you, and finding the right platform, like Jeremy had said. But the third piece is finding the right partners to work with, right? Like we had old legacy systems that we've converted into one, and Geneva personally, we've allowed us to grow on an existing platform that we're on. But at a certain point, you start to plateau, and the only way you can grow is with more humans, right? Doing more work. Going out and trying to vet out a particular partner that will allow your business to grow and form those relationships to be able to automate, like we had talked about earlier. For us, we spent some time looking out there for the right technology stack in order for us to do this. And like Jeremy had said, securely, right? For us, we partnered and we found Northtech. I know a plug for Christian here, but it's really been a great experience for our company to allow us to prepare for this embedded finance, to be able to receive an application and send it through syndication, connect with your Ocralysts, your fraud preventions, to be able to get those deals done. It's really key to find that right partnership. And that partnership has to provide flexibility for you, because not every business does things the same way. So being able to be flexible and work with you to achieve your guys' goals is really key to it. And hats off to Northtech on what they provided to us thus far. So
Well, thank you for the plug. Appreciate that, Aaron.
It's honesty.
So, all right, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so for the sake of time, we're going to kind of move along here, but you know, there's been a lot of talk about service-oriented architectures and as a service, and I just want to understand what it means to you. So I'll start with Lynette. Lynette, you know, you guys have been kind of a leader in this space for probably decades, right? And so tell us what this means as a service.
You know, when Christian talks about for decades, we came alongside that office equipment industry. I talked about that a little bit earlier, where you'd walk in the door and they're going to set you up on a payment. And a lot of times that payment includes maintenance. It includes potentially some cost per copy sort of features there as well. So when you think about as a service, you know, you were having a base payment there, but you were also paying for the use of that copier when you thought about those copy counts, really starting to see that expand. And I think there's so much potential, even when I think about, you know, Internet of Things, everything's wired up. If you've got construction equipment, you know, you can see the hours on it. If you're doing transportation, you can see the miles on there. And there's just a ton of industries where really having that borrower be able to do that pay as you go, pay for usage type thing makes that a lot more affordable for them. It's also just a great piece. We talked about gathering data, and when you think about embedded finance, all of that data that you can gather as you start to understand some of that usage as well on the equipment, that can create some opportunities for the vendors as well to understand when they need to be going out and potentially selling another piece of equipment. So I just think that as a service is really around, you know, making that affordable, helping that borrower be able to budget instead of being locked into maybe a really big payment. And maybe their business fluctuates and they're not sure how they're going to make that payment, but that as a service really lets them say, hey, as I'm using the equipment, I'm paying for it. And that way I've got the income coming in to support that payment all along.
Yeah, so interesting, right? Because like, I think a lot of times us within the industry say, oh, you know, equipment finance is a little bit behind in technology and whatnot. But we go back and we look at like what companies like Great America were doing in the office imaging space. And you guys even just removed the procurement process. So you didn't just like embed finance within the checkout process. Like you remove the procurement process altogether. Say, hey, you make a copy, you pay for it, right? And it's all just embedded. So it's interesting. So, all right, why don't we go on to the next slide? And we're going to get a little technical here. So Jeremy, can you explain to me and the audience, like what is an API?
I'm going to use an example. Some may have heard it before, but it's one that's familiar to me, and it makes this click, right? And it's wrapping API around like a restaurant experience, right? You're at a table, you have a menu, a waiter takes your order, and some food comes out and is put on your table, but you really don't see what goes on behind the scenes. You don't see the sausage being made, right? You ask for something and you get a result. And to relate that, you know, the API is really the menu. It's the list of services. There's electronic components. That's the waiter. It acts as the messenger, kind of the go-between back and forth. The kitchen serves as the database. It's where all of the contents are stored, where the data, the things that you're asking for, actually live and exist. The order is really just the API call that's made, that's sent to the kitchen. And then the served dish, what comes out in the end, that's the API response. That's the answer to your question. And it lets you enjoy the functionality of multiple external systems and services without really needing to know or manage how they're implemented and how they work.
A great example. Aaron, you know, another technical folk in the audience. So What would you say is how do you, if you have to go home and explain what an API is to your mom and dad, how do you do that?
And Jeremy broke it down excellent there. That was amazing. I've never heard it explained like that before, but yeah, really, you have two separate softwares, and it's a roadway for them to talk to each other, right? Like Jeremy had said, the request and the response. Think break that down. In his example, you had the customer in the kitchen. The customer being one platform, a piece of software, the kitchen being another platform, piece of software, and the integration between them was the server. Yeah, he had broke that down nicely there. I don't know if I can do a better job than that, but yeah, it's the gateway to allow really your developers to be able to have two completely separate, different pieces of software talk to each other.
Yeah. Well, great. That is helpful. So let's get into some business examples of what APIs are, and then we'll tie this back into how this works for embedded finance. So can we go on to the next slide? So, maybe just to kick it off, like the way we've seen things evolved, right? We started with paper, and then, digital transformation came along. We started to have loan origination software to have internal people work. And then probably the next evolution is more portals, letting vendors self-service and borrowers self-service, get their own quotes, create their own, submit their own apps. When they're ready for docs, they can click their own, generate docs button, generate their own docs, and so on and so on. And then we started to see the evolution of, well, you can even remove that piece and really integrate things with APIs, right? Like you can request a quote via an API, you can submit an app via an API. If you're ready to move forward with the purchase, you can generate docs via an API, right? So those, replacing the UI with this API. So Nate, building upon that, how are you seeing APIs used within embedded finance to how do the two technologies work to enable certain functions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, APIs are critical to being able to deliver embedded finance, to be able to automate and to deliver self-service. I also appreciated the explanation that was given in just that simplistic form of describing what APIs and the value that they offer. There are a few ways that that we've tried to leverage them. Obviously there's one approach to delivering self-service options, and that's just sort of trying to build and program everything yourselves. But the reality is that in terms of the transformation of data and the fact that it can now be done instantly for virtually every stage of a transaction is actually really, really exciting. A few examples in terms of implications of how we're using it. One is with the verification process. For us, we knew that in order to be able to offer financing in a truly fully self-service manner, one of the very difficult questions we asked ourselves is, how can we possibly accurately verify an individual, and how can we verify a business? So one example of how we're using APIs is for identity verification. From a practical perspective, we're allowing the individual, the user, or the signatory, whoever's consummating the loan, to scan their document, their driver's license or passport. The technology reads it, analyzes it, and then communicates with another data source that verifies that it's an authentic document based on each of the unique rules in all 50 states. And then combined with a live facial scan, it then confirms that that individual is the same individual who just submitted and scanned the driver's license. If you think of the historical process, there was a time where individuals would have to physically go into a bank and rely on that branch manager to look at the document and compare it to the individual. And that was the level of security and verification process. And this is one of many ways where technology has just allowed for much faster, more secure, reliable ways to authenticate individuals. I think another implication is in the underwriting process, which I guess I would consider maybe a step even beyond just the quoting. There have been a lot of tools out for a while that are able to quickly take in bits of information and display back to the user a range or even a fairly accurate quote in terms of what their pricing might look like. But now, even beyond that, there's the ability to not just quote or provide an offer, but to actually complete the full credit underwriting because of the APIs, because of the Dun & Bradstreets and PayNet and Equifax and all these other reporting agencies that are using APIs to quickly, instantly, real time send information back and forth to verify individual credit strength as well as credit strength of the underlying business. So the ability to, again, not just render a quote, but also a full approval and actually complete the underwriting process real time, instantly. Those are a few examples of API usage in commercial lending now.
Yeah. It's interesting that you use the fraud example too, like verifying the person, because I think, that's one thing that we can't lose sight of with these embedded finance solutions. A lot of them, like you said, are tied to these e-commerce platforms, right? Which typically e-commerce platforms are open to the internet, which makes you even more susceptible, because when you have a vendor, a known vetted vendor that you've been working with, of course there's vendor fraud, but it reduces the threat greatly by having that face-to-face relationship. You remove that, and it does add an element, and APIs to these third-party vendors is a great way to not eliminate it, but help in the fight. So thanks for volunteering that. So Lynette, so can you give some real life API examples that maybe you guys are doing at Great America?
Yeah, I'm probably the most non-techie person on the call, and 10 years ago, I probably couldn't have told you what an API was. And now I'm the first person to say, isn't there an API for that? Instead of, isn't there an app for that? We use APIs to integrate directly into our vendors' systems. It allows them to very seamlessly get a quote, submit a credit application to us, get updates on the credit applications. And if you think about, again, we talked about those sales reps, or whether it's a lease admin and an equipment vendor, they don't want to leave their system and go out to our portal. Do we have a portal that they can use? Absolutely. Do we answer the phone when they call? 100%. We'll respond to their emails. But the reality is they want to stay in the system that they're working in already, right? To do their equipment configurations, whatever they need to do on their end. So we're really trying to embed ourselves in their system so they can stay where they are, and then just send and receive information back and forth. We've started to be able to even send delinquency information. So if you think about an equipment vendor that's maybe done a bundled payment where they've got some maintenance dollars that are included in that, they want to know if that borrower isn't paying, and therefore know if they're not getting their maintenance dollars remitted back to them. So that's a really important piece as well. If they're going to roll a service truck, they want to know that they're getting paid for the maintenance. And so having that delinquency information or having cash be able to post to their accounts automatically is really important for them.
Okay, great. Maybe next slide we can start with Aaron. I mean, these are some of the obvious ones, being able to create quotes, apply approvals, document, these are all things that typically humans do, either via portal or in your internal loan origination system. Where do you see APIs at Geneva? How are you guys utilizing them?
Yeah, absolutely. We had spent extensive amount of time building out our own homegrown online application. We like to personalize it for all of our vendors and really form that Geneva Capital partnership with XYZ vendor. And we prefer that application over a standardized one. So as we moved into the Salesforce environment, that actually allowed us to use the Salesforce functionality, but also keep our own homegrown software intact, because we really had our marketing around that. We were able to connect those two platforms. So when the customer is online, it automatically feeds that Salesforce environment, the customer's information securely. And then from that point, like we had talked, like Nate had mentioned before, the APIs really, they're endless out there with all the different types of software, and using the Salesforce platform and Roller platforms that allowed us to hit those fraud checks to make sure that those people are real, hitting the mid desks, the Oculus, connecting with banks, to be able to really roll that through and use the APIs, not just a single one, but multiples, and be able to push that application through. So, and increase approval times, I should say increase approval rates with decreased time, right? That allowed us to be able to do that. And then, and most recently working with the vendors on the Shopify programs, to be able to have rate tables to feed individual vendors, different rate cards, as far as payment pricing on equipment, is a project in progress right now. And that's going to be using an API as well. So,
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I mean, you look at these point of sale systems, these e-commerce systems, kind of what Nate was talking about too. Obviously, from when you get technical, you can do some simple math and do some simple payment calculations, but rates are changing all the time, right? Like you can't just hard code this stuff in websites and expect accurate rates when the Fed is or is not moving rates unexpectedly. And so having the API to get that real data seems like a great use case for an API.
yeah, absolutely. And then just the final piece is the documents, right? Connecting with DocuSign and rolling that through for that full customer experience. So all this is happening without the customer knowing, and just providing them that smooth experience.
Yeah,
I
great.
think from a technical standpoint, what's really interesting about this, you've all done a great job of really describing these real world use cases, but to the audience on this call, why do we want to use APIs? Why do we want to integrate? Why do we want to do all these things? And something that jumps into my mind, right, as you're building out this platform and your solution, you got to keep in mind things that are modular, right? Because there's been a lot of name dropping here, right? There's a lot of really cool products that we all want to snap into our solution, third-party data providers, and things that we can pass information and get a bit of transformed information back. But having the modular capability lets you snap and bolt those components on and off. Maybe today you need one, tomorrow you need a different one. And that functionality and that modular ability of these modern solutions allow for that. And the other side is that you've got a decoupled platform, right? If one thing breaks, if your Experian API stops working, it doesn't stop the world, right? You can do a workaround on Experian. Maybe you get some data from Equifax or TU, and life goes on. You can deal with certain hiccups or glitches in the system, and that's one of the, I think, really fascinating things from a technology standpoint that makes this so appealing.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward to the final slide, and I'd like to go through kind of the round robin here. Okay, so I'm in the audience. I liked everything I heard. Great advice. But I'm a 20-person equipment finance company. What do I do to get started? How should I get started on something like this? And maybe we'll just start with Aaron. How would you suggest to the team or to the audience that somebody get started on this?
Yeah, it starts with defining your goals. What's your purpose going to be? What do you want the end result to be? And then go out, have a discussion, and really find that partnership that I had mentioned earlier. Find a partner that you're comfortable with, that provides you the flexibility. That's a key word that sticks with me. And Jeremy had just spoke to it, the modular ability, right? One thing may be working for you today, but in 2 months from now, you don't know, it may not work and you may have to change solutions. And that's where that flexibility, having an API integration in, is that you're able to swap things out. The best world scenarios that allow you to grow and be able to do more with less, right? Provide a better satisfaction, both for your company and for your vendor partnerships. So I really say go out there and vet out the right partners, meet with them, discuss your goals with them, and hopefully you can find a solution with them.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Lynette, what's your thoughts?
I'll echo everything Aaron said, and I may just take you in a slightly different angle here. We've talked about a lot of, I'll call them sort of the harder concepts. One of the things about Great America, we talked about the fact that we've always been very high touch and wanting to be a digitally enabled organization here. I think real alignment around, who you want to be as a company and what kind of experience you want for your customers, for your team members, and really defining what that looks like, and getting the right energy in the organization. As you go to automate, you're going to have team members that might be nervous about what their role looks like in the future, and helping them see how they've been adding value today may look differently than how they add value in a year or 3 years or 5 years. And this is really the softer side of digital change. And I think that's a piece that can easily be overlooked, but making sure you're setting that vision for your team so that they can see why this is valuable to them, how it's going to help them grow in their careers, how it's going to help them create a better experience for customers, and just getting people on board with that concept is huge.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing the human side into our discussion. With a bunch of techies, we need that. So thank you, Lynette. Nate, what are your thoughts to the audience? How can they get started?
Yeah, I actually agree with both of the comments that have been shared so far. I'll err slightly more on the human side to start. And, as Lynette was sharing, it reminded me of things that I've experienced and thought about, even with the previous company that I worked with, and the transition to doing something that's a bit different. I guess when I think about some of the obstacles to getting started, I think one of the biggest hurdles isn't a technical one, it's a psychological one. And I think it's related to, maybe adjacent to some of the things Lynette was mentioning. The reality is that the current model in commercial lending was really set up to maximize profit and to minimize risk. And converting to a new model that's intended to maximize customer convenience requires a mindset shift that's likely going to face some level of resistance, maybe because we've just been conditioned to do a certain process a certain way, or for other reasons. And I think without changing our mentality around commercial lending and even organizational design, discussions about some of the specific technical systems or procedures, candidly, I think are going to be a little bit less productive. But I think if there's, again, to Lynette's point, if there's a willingness to challenge existing paradigms and even existing mindsets, and then I think that there's a higher likelihood of finding ways to reinvent ourselves and to deliver entirely new value to customers in the process. From the technical side, I agree that the neat thing is that technology has evolved at a rate and to an extent to where organizations of any size don't necessarily need to take on the daunting task of building an entire embedded finance platform from scratch. There are organizations that you can partner with that have really devoted themselves to figuring some of that stuff out. I do think an important step that is a little bit more technical is finding ways to become more digital, right? So removing some of the manual things that Lynette spoke about, some of the challenges with how data is captured and archived. To the extent that organizations can become more digital, that's going to help to accelerate the process of sort of arriving at the desired future state in terms of being able to serve customers in a self-service format, to be able to automate, and to be able to deliver the speed that customers now expect.
Great point. Hey, Jeremy, what's your thoughts to the audience? How can they get started?
These are such good things that have already been presented, and I'm going to bring it back to the people, right? I think, one, we have to look to our peers, right? There's solution providers out there, but there's also our colleagues in the industry, all the people that are on this call, the people on the panel, right? There's a few of you that I've just met, but Christian, we go back a long time. You've been there since the beginning as a trusted advisor and a partner. And I often come to you with questions, maybe unrelated to exactly the technology of our platform, but just about this industry in general. And you're always there to answer them. But I would say to those out there who are looking to get started with this, look look to the culture of your business, look internally. You can't do this just, from an IT alone standpoint. The technology team isn't going to build all this out. They're going to need the understanding of the sales team, the stakeholders, the executive team. You're going to need a very collaborative effort to build out this roadmap, set that North Star for where we want to go with embedded finance. And then you've got the people, right, to get you there. You get them all involved, have them all rallied behind, and it's amazing what can be done.
Great. Well said, everybody. Well, I just want to thank Chad and NIFA for allowing us to sponsor and do this webinar. I also want to thank the participants, Lynette, Aaron, Jeremy, and Nate. Really appreciate all of your time and your input. And Chad, I don't know if you want to wrap it up, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone. This was very informative. There was one question that just came in. Let me just read this and maybe we can just wrap up with this final item. Can you explain how you are suggesting webhooks to return pricing? App status makes sense, but I don't think I understand the use case for pricing.
So webhooks is getting a little bit technical, so I apologize here. Basically, a webhook is like an API, but it's like talking back, like your children do. Like if you tell them to go take out the garbage and they say no, well, that's a webhook. It's the talking back piece when they're disconnected. So it just basically what we like in our API suite, you're able to submit an app. And of course, a lot of our clients do risk-based pricing, right? So you submit an app, a bunch of API stuff happens, and then you come back with pricing. Well, that's a webhook with pricing back to say, hey, here are 4 options with risk-based payment amounts, right? That essentially is what that means.
Great. Thanks,
Are there any
Christian.
other questions, Chad?
Nope, I think that wraps it up. We had a few questions today. Just for everyone's knowledge, we are recording this. We'll be uploading it into our member community next week, so you have access to it in our resource library. So again, thanks to our moderator, Christian, Jeremy, Lynette, Nate, Aaron, appreciate your insight into this topic. And again, if we get any questions from participants, we'll make sure to forward them on to all of you. So thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Take care.